Raider Nation? Welcome back to another edition of the Nation's official podcast. We are your hosts. I am TJ Kern. That is my guy, Blake Hartsfield. Blake, it feels like I'm on a hamster wheel, my guy. I feel like we've done this podcast before. Typical Tech game Saturday at Baylor. We thought this team might be different. We thought this team might be special. We thought this team was good at home. We thought this team was a lot of things. And yet here's your typical tech game, as you like to call it.
Yeah, TJ, this one,
Baylor.
yeah, TJ, not a good performance on Saturday. They dropped the game in Lubbock 59 to 35 to Baylor. And we're recording this on Wednesday. So, I think you and I have had three or 4 days here to get some perspective and get some distance from the game. I was angry on Saturday, and now it's just disappointment. It's a lot of the things you mentioned, but you feel like they're finally starting to turn a corner. They win 3 close games to start off conference play, all one possession games. They show you their fight and their grit. McGuire in a press conference coming into Baylor talked about how he preaches to the team about, coming into the game and figuring out what kind of game it's going to be and then getting in a dogfight in the fourth quarter. Well, TJ, you were not in a dogfight here. You got boat raced at home, and that's pretty disheartening.
And not only did you get boat raced at home, man, look, here's what I want to bring up first is I'm just going to be honest and come out and say it. This defense isn't good enough to come from behind. So I want to start with the special teams.
Yeah. You want to talk about it, or do you want me to talk about it?
Well, I mean, there were a lot of mistakes made early in that football game on special teams.
Yeah.
And that got you behind a couple scores. And then once you were behind a couple scores, look, I mean, we've talked about this defense all year on this podcast. This team's not built to come from behind. If you're going to win by scoring 35 or more points, that's kind of the formula. Give the ball to Taj. You're going to win shootouts. You might get a turnover on defense here or there that is a big one and can kind of seal the victory for you, right? Takeaways have been a big deal for this team. But special teams really let the team down on Saturday.
Yeah, TJ, it starts with the shanked punt where Baylor gets the ball, I think, on like our 45-yard line, and they score in 2 plays. So that's gifting them 7 points. Then the next punt, he punts it, and the guy returns it for a touchdown because he kicks this line drive kick down the sideline that way out kicks his coverage. They return that for a touchdown, and it was just a comedy of errors that you're gifting them points. And then as soon as they return the touchdown on the punt, the ensuing kickoff, we can't field it. They end up recovering it and tack on another field goal. So you're gifting them 17 points to start the game. And then to your point, TJ, this defense isn't good enough to play from behind. TJ, I'm going to preface what I'm about to say by saying I like Tim DeRuyter. I think Tim DeRuyter has done a really, really good job at Texas Tech in his 3 years here. And this is year 3 with McGuire. Saturday was atrocious. I think he failed all the way around. There's no other way to sugarcoat that. He came in with a plan clearly to play a 3-man front, and we're going to get into this, but he came in with a plan to play a 3-man front. It was not working, and he refused to adjust or deviate from that plan, and they get shredded for 59 at home.
Shredded for 59 at home by a local kid, Blake. The starting quarterback for Baylor from Lubbock, Texas, did not have a scholarship offer from the Red Raiders. Sawyer Robertson. He came back and played really well in the 806. I'm sure he had a lot of family and friends in the stands who were kind of torn because I'm sure they're all Red Raider fans, but they wanted to see the local boy do good. And man, he led Baylor to an explosive win on Saturday. And I don't know what the reason would be why a local, decent prospect wouldn't at least get an offer. But, the quarterback room's been in pretty good shape, with Shuck and then Morton. So, I mean, I don't know the reasoning behind it, but
probably the reasoning behind it. No, that's probably the reasoning behind it, TJ. To your point, he had a good game, 21 of 32, 275 yards, 5 touchdowns. The more concerning thing to me is they give up 255 yards collectively on the ground. TJ, you're not going to win very many football games when you're giving up 255 yards rushing and then 275 passing to the opposing quarterback. And on this defensive line, TJ, it's a disaster. I mean, especially in this 3-man front thing, right? Because they can't do any of the 3 things that you want a defensive line to do. They can't set an edge. They can't stop the run up the middle, and they generate zero pressure. The quarterback has got all day back there to text his girlfriend and cook breakfast and check his stock portfolio before he has to deliver the football, and there's no one even putting any pressure on him whatsoever. And TJ, you look at the numbers on this. In 2022, they obviously had Tyree Wilson, but they have 31 sacks, which is 2.38 sacks per game. In 2023, last year, they finished with 27 sacks, which is 2.07 sacks per game. This year, they have 6 sacks. They're averaging less than a sack per game, and they had 0 tackles for loss against Baylor. And I'm sorry, TJ, if you're not putting the defense behind the chains ever, it's really hard to get stops, and you're seeing the byproduct of that. The defensive line has to start playing better. Period.
Well, like I was saying earlier, I mean, it seems like the only way for this defense to really help the offense is with takeaways.
Yeah.
And they've gotten a few of those this season, but which go into stops, right? When you take the ball away, you get stops and help your offense out. But man, as far as when it comes down to playing defense, it's just not good. Can't get
No.
pressure, like you said. Can't stop the run. I
Can't
mean,
set an edge. I mean, the defensive line doesn't do anything, and everybody talks about the secondary not being able to cover. Well, I don't care who you are, TJ. You could
you
have
got 20 seconds.
yeah, if you could put together a group of 3 all pro corners from the NFL back there, and if the defensive line gives them 9 seconds, at some point somebody's going to get open, like because the receiver knows where they're going, and the corner has to react to that. So it starts with the defensive line. The 3-man front is ridiculous. I hope that DeRuiter and McGuire are going to watch this film and just burn it and say we're not running a 3-man front again. Coincidentally, the one stop they got all game to start the second half, they played a 4-man front. They got a stop, and then we scored to make it 24-20, and with like 9 minutes to go in the third quarter. And I texted you during that. I said, okay, surely this is where we take control of this football game, and this ends up being a close but hard fought win. And it goes the opposite way, TJ. Baylor reels off like 21 consecutive points. We don't come out of the 3-man front. They're gashing us for 15 yards a carry, and it just got real ugly real fast.
Yeah, and the narrative around this team, has been, or out of Lubbock, after starting off where we were, was why isn't this team ranked? This team's 5-1, 3-0. A lot of people were like, why isn't this team ranked? And they opened the broadcast with that, and I was like, because they're not good, right? Like we thought it was a decent team, like, but let's compare to the top of the Big 12, right? Like this defense is not good enough to win the conference. So like all the stuff about Tech getting to the Big 12 title game, which by the way they still can, should they play out the rest of their schedule. One loss does not kill you, right? One loss does not a season make. You are what your record says you are. You're 5-2, 3-1. So all is not lost if they can fix some of these issues. I personally just don't see these issues getting fixed.
It's really hard to know what you're going to expect. You made the comment a couple of weeks ago on the podcast about it reminds you of the Cowboys, where you take it week to week and you never know what you're going to get. Right, one week they can come out and look great, and the next week they look like one of the worst teams in the league, like they don't have a clue. You think about this season for Tech, TJ. They've played 3 good games. They played really good against Cincinnati. They played really good against
The
Arizona
two
State,
Arizona schools.
the 2 Arizona schools, 3, and I guess we can give them the UNT game. So they've played 4 good games. But then they've played 3 really bad games because you played horrible against Baylor. You played horrible against ACU in the season opener in a game that we've talked about you should have lost and were very lucky to win. And then you got boat raced at Washington State. So 4 good performances and 3 really, really bad performances. I have no idea what to expect this weekend at TCU, and I don't know what this team is. Is this team good or are they terrible? Probably somewhere in between. But I can tell you what they're not, TJ. Like you said, they're not good enough to play from behind with this defense. They're not good enough to overcome special teams blunders, which, to the special teams credit, up until this game has been really good this year. They haven't had any big returns, and they've done a good. That has to get cleaned up. They're not good enough to overcome 10 or 11 penalties. They've gotten better there, but they've still got work to do, particularly on the offensive line on pre-snap penalties. They're not good enough to beat themselves and still win football games. They're going to have to play clean football because you are what your record says you are. Yeah, they're 3-1 in the Big 12, but you look at the games, 4 good performances, 3 not good performances. So who knows?
Absolutely. And speaking of TCU week, Blake, that leads us to our next point, which was we made a little bet with you and the wifey.
Yeah, we do have a little bet. For those that don't listen to our podcast and haven't heard me talk about this before, my wife is a TCU grad. So it's always it's a game we go to every time it's in Fort Worth, and it's always a little friendly rivalry. Well, we're doing a T-shirt bet, so if TCU wins, I've got to do next week's podcast in a TCU T-shirt and gear, wearing purple. And if Tech wins, she's going to make an on-camera appearance in Tech gear and talk about how Tech is superior to TCU, and that'll kill her a little bit inside when she has to do that. So that is a little friendly wager between my wife and I that we're going to put on the pod.
That's very, very exciting here on the nation's official podcast with TJ and Blake. We got a little side bet from Vegas Blake over there with the wifey on who's going to win this week against TCU. Blake, let me get a scouting report. You watch TCU probably more than most Tech fans?
Yeah,
What are they looking like, and what do you think the chances are this week? I know the Red Raiders have opened as underdogs this week.
we are 6 point dogs, which I can't really blame Vegas after what this defense just put out against Baylor. It's hard to favor them going on the road to TCU. To answer your point, TJ, um, look in the mirror and then tweak the offense to a little bit better passing, not as good at running because they don't have Taj Brooks. They've got a quarterback that can sling it. He's young. He makes mistakes, but he can throw it all over the yard. I think he's like third in the Big 12 in passing. They score a bunch of points, but TJ, their defense is a lot like ours. They can't stop a nosebleed. They can't stop anyone. The only team they've stopped all year is Utah without Cam Rising this past weekend, and Utah can't score on anyone. So TCU's defense is not good. I think they gave up like 56 to SMU earlier this year. So expect a shootout. I think the over under in this one is 64 and a half. Very similar concepts though. I mean, these coaching staffs are, it's a Sonny Dykes team. They run the air raid. They're from the same offensive system as you. It's just they're probably a little bit better at throwing the ball down the field than you are. You're probably better at running the football and some of the RPO read type stuff that both offenses incorporate, but they're very similar.
Very similar indeed. And Blake, do we are we going with the prediction yet? Have you given it enough thought to
So prior
give us?
to the Baylor game, I was extremely confident about this game. I thought we were, after watching how SMU took it to them, I thought we were going to go into Fort Worth in a game that's a road game for the Red Raiders and put on a performance and win the game comfortably by 10 points. Um, After seeing what I saw against Baylor, it's really hard for me to pick Tech coming off of that performance. So I'll make a contingent prediction, TJ. If they've burned the 3-man front and they realize they don't have the nose tackle or personnel to play an unbalanced front like that, and they're going to come out with 4 down and actually bring some pressure, take some chances, and try to get off the field or create turnovers, Tech wins a close game. I'll say something like 42 to 36, something like that. It's still a shootout. If they continue to play the 3-man front, TCU will run the football all day long and off of their pass, and it'll be like 52-27 TCU. So I really think it's that big of a difference on the defensive approach to this game for Tech.
I gotcha. And Blake, before we get out of here, basketball season, our favorite time of year, is approaching, my friend. Big 12 Media Days were today. And what are your thoughts here as basketball season approaches?
TJ, I think they're going to be good. They all of the major analytics don't ignore the AP top 25. They're not ranked in the AP, but the things that matter, the Ken Palm rankings, the Torvik rankings, the Haslam metrics, all have them in the top 15 or 16 in the country. They're either sixth or seventh, depending on how that people view them against Cincinnati in the Big 12, and that's a good thing because there's 5 Big 12 teams in the top 10 of the AP poll and all the metrics websites. They had their media days today, and the one thing that I took away from it, TJ, that Coach McCaslin referenced in 3 or 4 different answers is they have the versatility to play different styles this year. He made an emphasis and a point about talking about how they got bigger up front, which they did with the additions of JT Toppin and Frederico. But it sounds like that they can play styles where they play both of them and they play JT at the 4 and can go big, quote unquote, which they could not do last year especially once Cambridge went down. They had, Warren Washington and no other bigs. Now they've got Cambridge as their 3rd big or 4th big. Um, And then he talked about how they can also go small and put JT Toppin at the 5 and play Hawkins with three snipers around him, and McMillan, Walton, and D5. So um, I think McCaslin's got more tools and more quivers in the arrow this year, or more arrows in the quiver this year. He's got more versatility to throw at opposing teams and adapt to a game, and I just think they're going to be really solid.
And for those fans that, because we haven't really talked a lot of basketball here on the pod just yet, for those fans that are unfamiliar with Elijah Hawkins and JT Toppin, what are we getting in the new Red Raiders?
So Elijah Hawkins is a transfer; he's a senior, and this team is old. TJ, I think they've
Evan
got
Overton
three.
as well. So the three guys.
Yeah, so they've got three super seniors on this team and two seniors. So they're experienced, but Elijah Hawkins is your prototypical distributing point guard. He's a floor general, so to speak. He's from transfer from Minnesota. He's a senior. He's a great passer. In their scrimmage against Drake, I think he had 9 assists. He averaged 7.5 last year at Minnesota, and he's going to be playing around more offensive talent than he's ever played about. McCaslin talked about that. JT Toppin is a athletic, rebounding power forward that can score from the mid range. He's worked on his 3-point game. He was the leading rebounder at the NBA Combine. Decided to come back to school because they wanted him to work on his 3-point shot. So that's been an area of focus for him. Frederico is a big man's big. He's not going to be flashy on the offensive end, but he can go up and get alley oops. He's physical at the point of attack. Great rebounder, physical on defense. And then the last guy, Kevin Overton, this is a sophomore transfer from Drake. He's a 6'6" guard, can shoot the three pretty well, can attack the basket, good defender. Just another long perimeter player for McCaslin to go to. And he emphasized the defense. He said, that's the next step for us. Last year we finished second in the Big 12 in shooting at 3-point percentage at 36%. They're returning a lot of good shooting percentages with those three guys that we talked about in Walton, McMillan, and D5. And he talked about the defense being the next step. And I expect this team to be very good and compete in the Big 12.
And I'm really excited about this team. We got your guy D5 coming back, my guy Chance McMillan coming back, and then we got to watch a few games, and I got to pick another new guy.
I suspect the likely suspects there, TJ, is one of us will claim the big fella in JT Toppin, and one of us will migrate towards the floor general guard. Knowing our personalities, you'll probably like a JT Toppin type because you'll like the flashiness, and I'll probably like the way that Hawkins controls the game, the flow of the game, and just sets the pace and the tempo, and just controls the game from start to finish.
Well, there you have it, everybody, here on the Nation's official podcast. TJ and Blake talk a little Red Raider hoops after the football team got blown out last Saturday by Baylor as they take on TCU this Saturday. Blake, it was fun. And how do we always get out of here, bud?
Wreck 'em.
Wreck 'em. We'll see how the Red Raiders do on Saturday.